Hi, my name is Christian.
And my name is Dana.
And we're super excited to be having the Conflux virtual kickoff.
For this kickoff, we'll go through a number of subjects that's relevant for your relationship. But before we do that, Christian would like to give you a short introduction of how this is going to go down.
Before we actually get started with the kickoff, there's just a bunch of people I'd like to thank. First of all, thank you, mentors and mentees who are watching the videos right now, because you are the ones who are going to fill out this program. You are the ones who have stepped up and said, hey, I might need help with this, or I have some expertise that I'm able to give on to other people. And the fact that you've stepped forward and signed up for the program is something I'm really, truly grateful for. Furthermore, we would like to thank all of our partners, ITU, DTU. We'd like to thank Tuborg for funding us, and we would like to thank Engineer the Future for helping us figure out what we want to do with the program and where we want to go at the end of the day. This event can be seen in two main different ways. You're probably used to hearing presentations from professors and YouTube videos and stuff like that, where it's very one-sided communication, where we would talk for 1.5 to 2 hours and then you just sit there and look. But the thing is, this kickoff is going to be different. The focus is on you. It is on you and your relationship and doing everything we possibly can to make sure that it has the best chance of succeeding. We're going to have a couple of small talks, and then we're going to have workshop sessions. The workshop sessions can be done in two different ways. First, we have taken out some time. We're going to say, hey, talk about this for 5 minutes, and on the screen, you'll be able to see a countdown, counting down for the 5 minutes so you know how much time you have. So one way to do it is to follow that timeline. The second way you're able to do it is to agree with the mentor, with the mentee, that you might need a bit more time or you might need a bit less. And the way you do that is just to agree that when you go to a workshop, you can pause it and then talk for however long you might need and then go on afterwards. The reason why we have a timeline and all that is just to make sure that it doesn't take too long time. But if you guys have the time, then be sure to use it. I'll just give you a few seconds to talk to the person, talk to your partner, the person you're going to be having the relationship with, and figure out, are we going to follow the timeline that we've set up, or are you just going to take it as it comes, pause every time, and then re-find the right place to go on? You get a few seconds to talk about that.
So for this first part of the program, we'd just quickly like to give you a brief introduction of who Conflux actually is. We're going to be focusing most of this virtual kickoff session on getting the two of you to interact, so we'll make sure to make this short and just get it out of the way from the beginning. Conflux is a non-profit, student-driven organization. Now this means that for this program, this entire program to run smoothly, we have 9 dedicated students who use their voluntary time to make this happen. One common vision for all of us is that we all want to make students thrive in the world of tomorrow. Because during university and during our studies, we gain a lot of subject matter expertise in terms of the field that we study. However, what we've come to realize is that that's very important, of course, but there's also a lot of other things that we're missing during our studies. Things that are related to more personal development or more professional development, so we know how to navigate in all the many possibilities that we have as students. So in order to bring more of these things into play for students, about a year ago, we created a pilot project for a mentorship program, bringing in 23 mentors and 23 dedicated mentees who were all willing to grow and develop together. Now, what we've learned from this pilot project has led us to where we are today. with a new program starting today in March 2020 and lasting until September 2020, with 160 mentors and 160 mentees participating. And what we can say from our pilot project, but also the program that is starting today, is that you get what you give. And that means that when going into a mentoring relationship, we usually have two options. There's option A, where we say, well, this is probably going to be okay. I mean, I've gotten into this mentorship program, and if I just show up to a couple of meetings or two, I'll probably learn something. Maybe I won't, and that's also okay. But we also have option B, and that is saying, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that I get the most out of this program as possible. Meaning that when my mentor and I agree that I should read a book for next meeting, or that I should try this out, or if I should apply it to this job, or whatever it might be, I'll do that. And I'll make sure that I do whatever I can to follow up on the things we agree on. Now, most of us can probably tell that the option B is probably the one we will get the most out of in this program. But before we dive into the technicalities of what you can do to get the most out of the relationship, what is actually important in a mentoring relationship is connection, and that you actually know the person you're engaging with. So for this next workshop, we'd like to use some time for the two of you to get to know each other a bit better. And we're going to do this by answering two questions together. The first question is, what is one interesting thing you don't know about me? If I had to answer that question, it would probably be that when I wasn't that old, I wanted to join a sport. And of course, from the many possibilities that there were, I chose basketball, even though I'm not that tall. I didn't want that to stop me. So that's probably one interesting thing you don't know about me. The second question is, what is one thing the two of us have in common? If I had to answer that question, even though I'm all alone here, that would be maybe together with Christian. The two of us are very interested in going to a bunch of different events. Sometimes not events that are super relevant to what we study, but we do it because we like to expand our horizon and learn a lot about things that we don't learn during our studies. In these two questions, I have a challenge for you. Instead of trying to answer the questions a bit superficial, like we can all say we have the same eye color, or both of us like to watch television or whatever. But the challenge here is to actually try to go a bit deeper. Try to focusing on more personal things that can help you, first of all, get to know each other a bit better, but also maybe know what it is that you're going into in this relationship. So take a few moments to talk about that, and then we'll return.
Perfect. I really hope you enjoyed that conversation with your partner, just getting to know each other a tiny bit better. But before we dive into getting to know each other a bit better and figuring out what we want out of the program, each one of us, we'd like to take some time just to focus on ourselves. And one time in my life I needed to focus on myself was right when I started university. Back then I had just moved into a dorm, and the thing about DTU is that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday and Friday the same bar is open. And I ended up getting a few friends that would constantly invite me to the bar, which means that during my first semester I probably spent 3 or 4 days a week going to that bar, the cellar bar, killer bar, if you guys know that. And the thing is, I figured out after a while that didn't make me happy. I talked to a bunch of people down there, but those people I only talked to when I was down there. If I met them on the street in university, I wouldn't really speak with them. So what I ended up doing instead is, instead of having a bunch of loose connections that I didn't really talk too much, I focused on what can I do to create more lasting relationships. And for me, what I did was just gather a few friends every other week to a dinner, no alcohol, no nothing. And then I could keep in touch with a bunch of my friends without having to get super drunk. The only reason I could do that was because I was able to take a step back and figure out what's important to me. And that's what we're going to do now. So one challenge I have for you now is just to take a few minutes just for yourself. You might be tempted to talk to your mentor, your mentee, whatever. For now, just focus on yourself and think about what's one thing or a couple of things that I would like to get out of this program. Okay, perfect. Now we've had a bit of time just to figure out what I want to get out of this program. the next thing we're gonna do is to dive into what would it require from me to get whatever I just wrote out of the program. This might mean that if my challenge is to get a job, it might be to write a resume, go to a few job interviews, get better at how to say to a company what I can do for them. If my challenge is to get a high grade in some subject, it might be to study a bit more or to learn from some people who are great at that. And if my challenge is to get to know my mentor and my mentee a bit better during the next couple of months, it might be to make sure that I show up prepared to the meetings and I do everything I can to make it work. So just take a few moments and write down what's right for you. What would it take to accomplish the goals that you just talked about? Go. Perfect. Now you've thought a bit about each one of you, what you want to get out of it and what would it require for me to get out of it. Now you'll turn to your mentor or your mentee and you'll talk for a bit about what did each one of you write. If you have written down anything that you don't want to share, then by all means don't share it. But if you can, just tell them what would you like to get out of the program and what would it require to get it out of the program. The thing is, we're gonna dive more deeply into this. This is just a broad level overview of what would we like to get out of it and how do we do that in the best way possible.
So now that we've taken some time to think and talk about why we're here today and what we want to get out of the program, for this next session, we'll talk a bit about mentorship from a more high-level perspective. What is a good mentor? What is a good mentee? And what is important in a mentor relationship? Now, what is the actual definition of a mentor? Well, the formal definition is an accomplished and experienced person who takes a special personal interest in helping to guide and develop a junior. Now, this might seem a bit intimidating or maybe a bit scary for some of you, because this is a person who has taken out their time to help you as a mentee to develop and grow. And you might be wondering whether or not you're wasting that person's time or whether or not you have to live up to some kind of expectation. Well, the thing is, these people have been in your shoes. They've also been a student, maybe sat up for an entire night cramming on an assignment at the library, or they might also have gone to a Thursday bar and stayed up maybe a bit too late or had a bit too many beers when they actually had a lecture at 8 a.m. the next morning. So it's not that important that you think about whether or not you're going to waste that person's time. What is actually very important is that you focus on how you can build trust in your relationship. And that, of course, goes both ways. Now, this is not rocket science, but here in Conflux, we like to talk about 4 simple but very effective ways that you can build up trust in your relationship. The first one is respect appointments, meaning that you respect the appointment you make with your mentor when you agree to meet at a certain place or a certain time. The second one is reach out. Whenever you feel like there's something that might be relevant to discuss with your mentor or your mentee, don't be afraid to actually reach out to that person, because that's why you're engaged in this relationship. The third one is honest communication. So if something's not working out in a relationship, or maybe you prefer things done in a bit different way, you're actually honest about it and you don't hold back. And the fourth one is listening actively. So when you're at a meeting or when you're discussing a certain topic, make sure that you actually think about the relevant points, write them down, and maybe think about them afterwards and bring them up at the next meeting. Now, it's important to say that building trust goes both ways. It's relevant for your mentor to build up trust in a relationship, and it's relevant for your mentee to build up trust in a relationship. Just as everything else in your relationship, this goes both ways. And once you build up trust in your relationship, it makes it way easier for you as a mentor to help encourage and inspire your mentee. Most of you probably know Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg. Steve Jobs as the founder of Apple and Mark Zuckerberg as the founder of Facebook. Well, what most of you probably didn't know is that Steve actually used to mentor Mark Zuckerberg. It was at that time where Mark wasn't really sure which direction he was going to take Facebook. So he needed some guidance from someone who had been in the same shoes as himself. So Mark decided to reach out to Steve Jobs to get some advice on whether or not he should sell the company or whether or not he should continue growing the company and finding a new vision for where he was going to take it. When he did this, Steve Jobs thought back to the time where he was in the same situation as Mark. And there was 2 ways he could actually approach this problem. He could either say, well, hey, try to make a business plan, try to do this and this and this. But what he did instead was choose the second option. He looked into his own experience and what he did when he was in the same situation. So we told Mark to visit a temple in India that Steve himself visited when he was struggling to find out what to do with Apple. What happened was Mark actually went and visited this temple, helping him reconnect with the values of the company, and it led him to build one of the most successful tech companies today. Now, what is the takeaway from this story? Well, it's probably not that you should advise your mentee to go to India. That might not be very relevant for your relationship, maybe it is, but the actual point is that one, in a mentor relationship, your mentor might tell you something that might seem a bit weird or you're not really sure why that's important for you. Try to consider it anyway. Try to consider doing what they're telling you or considering finding out how this is actually important to you, because there's a reason why they're advising you to do that. And the second point is, in a mentor relationship, we can all wear different hats. Now, this is of course not physical hats that you can put on your head, but more different roles you as a mentor can take on in a relationship to help facilitate learning. Now, in Conflux, we talk about 6 different hats in a mentor relationship. The first one is the guru, which is where you focus more on the advice you can give in a professional context, like how to act in meetings or how to deliver customer presentations or anything related. The second one is the coach, and the coach focuses on the power of questions, helping your mentee find the answers themselves instead of giving it to them. The third one is the buddy, who creates an empathic environment, more or less like a friend, where you're open to talk about more personal things on a more personal level. The fourth one is the networker, who uses the power of their own network to help facilitate contact with people that might know more about the subject than you do yourself. And then we have the devil's advocate, who's focusing on critical thinking and how they can challenge the views of their mentee. So for this next workshop, we're going to be talking about hats. Well, more precisely, we're going to be talking about how you can best facilitate learning in your relationship. And in this, we're going to be focusing on both you as mentors, but also mentees. So for you mentors, try to think about which hats come most naturally to you. Are you more the type of person who asks a lot of questions? Or are you more the type of person who's very solution-oriented and tries to get to the bottom of a certain issue? And mentees, try to talk a bit about what hats do you need the most in order to grow, and what hats are you not that certain that you like to be approached with. And the important thing here is that you also make sure that it's okay for you to try out different hats in your relationship. And if not, that you mentees make sure that you clarify, maybe I don't like having a lot of critical questions asked, or maybe I don't like hard feedback. So talk about these 2 questions and then we'll get back to you afterwards.
Okay, now we've talked a bit about the different hats we can have on and what hats we need. And one quick point before we dive into the challenges and pitfalls we can have in our relationship is to say showing up is only half the battle, which means that half of what you have to do in this program is sign up, and you've already done that. But from now on, it's going to take work, because a mentorship relationship, like all relationships and all programs, take work to make sure that they work out well. But I think a lot of you have already taken the first steps and done the things you need to do to make sure that your relationship works out well. A lot of you have probably already talked to one another on the phone before having this meeting. A lot of you have written emails back and forth just to get to know each other a bit, so you don't dive into the workshop without knowing each other at all. And some of you might even have met up before or had a meeting over Skype just to get to know each other. And the thing is, if you keep up that level of engagement that you've done so far, there's a good chance that everything's going to work out well. The thing we're going to talk a bit about now is the challenges and pitfalls. The thing is, the first round we did of the program with 23 mentors and 23 mentees that we've already talked about, most of them got a lot out of the program. But the thing is, we had one pair that wasn't that happy about it. And when we talked to both of the parties, we figured out one thing. It was about expectations. It was about figuring out, what do I want to get out of the program and what do you want? The mentee was thinking, okay, I'll just take a few meetings and then see what happens, while the mentor was really interested in being part of the program and in making a difference to this mentee. And because the expectations were mismatched, they ended up not working out that well. So what we're going to talk a bit about now is based on our own self-awareness. It's based on how we know ourselves. We're going to talk about the challenges that we can have during the program. For me, if I had a mentor, 2 challenges might be the first of all, that sometimes I'm quite bad at answering my email if I'm busy. So if I'm lying down with a bunch of schoolwork and really focusing on that, I might not get to my email for a few days. And that means that if my mentor has written me, or my mentee has written me, I would not end up responding to it that quickly. Another thing is that once in a while I have a hard time keeping a calendar, which means that once, like a couple of times it happened where I've gotten a message saying, hey, when are you here? And I've been like, oh, wow, I forgot about that deal we had. I forgot about what I was supposed to do now. And the thing is, if we know ourselves, and based on how much we know ourselves, we can figure out what possible roadblocks can come up ahead and what can we do to make sure that we solve them in the best way possible. And just take a few minutes to talk about that. Okay, the next thing we'll dive into just really quickly, a couple of minutes, is what do we do if things fail? In most of our relationship, in most of our experience, things are going to work out well, because at the end of the day, it's all about connection. It's not about what education you have, it's not about what industry you're in, it's not that much about the position you have at a job. It's mostly the fact that if you take two different people and put them in a room and ask them to figure out how do we help each other in the best way, most of the time it's going to work out well. But sometimes it doesn't. Maybe you have a mentor that you're unable to get in contact with, a mentee that doesn't prepare to the level that the two of you have agreed to. And in that case, we just want to say, we are here to help you. On the screen right now, you can see our contact information, and please don't hesitate to contact us and ask us for help if you reach a problem. Unless we specifically agree about it, we're not gonna take the information you tell us and relay it to your mentor, relay it to your mentee, relay it to anyone. It's gonna stay with us, and we are gonna figure out how do we solve this. It's also a great idea to contact us if you figure out, hey, this relationship is not gonna work out, we would like to end it, because then we have some tools for you to end it off in a good way. A lot of you are not going to need this, luckily, but now you know you have that option.
Luckily, there are a bunch of ways we can avoid getting into challenges and pitfalls in our relationship. And for this next session, we're going to be talking about exactly that. A while ago, I went on a skiing trip with my boyfriend and his family. And besides getting a bunch of skiing done, we also played a lot of board games in the afternoon. One of the board games of choice was Monopoly. And one particular afternoon, we had a great time sitting down at the table with a hot cup of cocoa in a situation that looked more or less like this. We're all super excited to play a game of Monopoly. But about 10 minutes into the game, the situation started to look more like this. Some of you may have experienced it. A cozy game of Monopoly turns into a huge family fight because none of you actually decide to sit down and make sure you all agree on the rules for the game. We all have our different version of what the rules for Monopoly is when we play with friends or with family. And none of us really bothered to actually pick up the game and look into the official rule set for the game. And what happened in this situation is actually something we can transfer into a mentoring relationship. It is super important that we play by the same rules, that we play by the same agreements that we set for our relationship. And we have some tools that we can help you in setting these agreements. And that is what we call a mentoring contract. The mentoring contract is a set of agreements that you sit down and decide for your relationship going forward with your mentor and mentee. Now, how could a mentoring contract look? Well, one example of a mentoring contract could be, well, we look at frequency and we decide that we have a meeting once a month, that we follow up on each meeting so we know what we've learned from that meeting and so we know what the agenda should be for the next. In terms of time, we make sure that all meetings are about 1 hour and we're always allowed to contact each other, and if we don't have time, we simply don't answer the phone. And one agreement that might be a good idea in general to look at is having a final meeting. Meaning that you agree on that no matter what happens in your relationship, you will make sure that you have a final meeting where you discuss what you've gotten out of the relationship and how your relationship should be going forward from this program. So what we're going to do now is, in our mentoring pairs, we're going to agree on how our mentoring contract and our ground rules for our relationship are going to look. First, we're going to take 1 to 2 minutes where you just sit down and think for yourself how you imagine the rules could look like. And after that, you're going to talk together in your pairs and try to fill out your own contract and what you think should be included in that. We've sent out a link to all of you with a template for the contract, and you can decide which one of you is going to write while you're talking about how it's going to look. Make sure that you make a digital signature or something afterwards when you filled it out. It's not legally binding, but it's a good way to make sure that both of you are committed to having these rules for a relationship.
Okay, now we have talked about what we can do to make sure that our mentorship relationship works out well. For the last bit of this kickoff, we'd like to just dive deep into the super concrete stuff that you can do and the goals that you have for the relationship. The thing is, some people go on stage and say the important thing is to have a clear goal for what you want to achieve. But the thing is, if you look at sport, if you look at Tour de France, for instance, all teams want to win. All teams have the same goal. All teams say, we want to win the first place. That means that if it was true there was only the goal that was important, all teams would win all the competitions every year. So obviously there has to be something else. The British cycling team had a long time where they didn't win any versions of the Tour de France. What they did was that one of their coaches chose to go after the marginal returns. And what that means is that they took a look at the entire organization and focused on the small things they could improve. They changed out the pillows that the cyclists were using so they could sleep just a bit better and be just a bit more ready for the race next day. They shaved off a few grams on the weight of the bike so they could do just a bit better. And they changed a bunch of small things. And the thing is, all of those small things combined ended up making a big difference. After a while, they ended up winning 5 out of 6 years of Tour de France. Because of all those small changes combined, ended up with a big change. So they hadn't just had a goal, they also had a way to achieve it. They had a plan as well. And the point about aggregate returns is one of the reasons I love mentoring. Because as students, when we graduate university or when we're still studying, we have between 60 and 70,000 hours left in our career. 70,000 hours. And 70,000 hours is a bunch of time. So if at the start of your career, because you were part of this mentoring program or because you got some training, you became a couple of percentage points more productive, or you became a bit better at negotiating your salary, or at managing others, or managing up, so your manager and your leader like you and stuff like that. If you do some of those small things in the start of your career, over time, over all of those years, you're hopefully going to be in the job market. That's going to compound. And that's, at the end of the day, going to save you a bunch of hard work. It's going to make sure that your career can go much farther than it otherwise would have been. Not because of some big changes you made, but because you just got a few percentage points more smart. You got a bit better at knowing where do I want to go and how do I get there. And that's why I love mentoring. The thing we're going to do now is that it's the mentees' time to talk. Mentors, your challenge for this next small session is to say, what questions can I ask to make sure that the mentee talks and keeps on talking for as long as possible? This is not the time to put in your experience or tell a story or something. It's just your challenge, mentors, just to ask some questions, to keep the mentees talking as much as possible. Mentees, the questions we want you to answer are 2 different ones. First of all, which goals and challenges do I have from my study time? It might be a grade you would like to get, it might be a job, a part-time job you might want to get, it might be a bunch of things. It's all depending on what you want. The second thing is to answer, how do I see myself in 5 years, or where do I see myself in 5 years? Of course we know you're not a fortune teller, you can't look into the future and see where you're going to go. It's just, right now, at this moment, where do I see myself? What stuff could be interesting? Am I working alone? Am I working with other people? Where in general do you want to go? So mentees, talk a bunch, mentors, ask some questions. We'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. what we would like you to do now, mentors, is to just talk for a bit about how can I help you as my mentee? How can people in my network help in the best way possible? And which tools, in a broader sense, can I give you that's going to help you the most? When we say tools, we don't mean a hammer or a nail or something. It might be a good book you've read. It might be an online course. It might be a personality test or a way of seeing stuff. It's tools to a broad extent. Mentees, your challenge right now is to ask as many questions, to keep the mentor talking for a bit. Mentors, if you need to take a few seconds to think first, be sure to do that, no problem at all. But we'll give you a few moments just to talk and see how can I help you if I'm the mentor and you're the mentee. Perfect. Now we're almost at the end of the event. One last thing we're going to ask you to do before we just round off the event in a good way is to pick out your calendar, take the little book out of your pocket, go on to Google Calendar, whatever you do, and pick out the first 2 meetings. The reason we're doing 2 meetings and not 1 meeting is because if the first meeting gets cancelled, which can happen sometimes, it can be difficult if you only have 1 meeting in the calendar to keep up the momentum and make sure you have time. If you commit right now and say, okay, we'll put these 2 meetings in the calendar, the chance that everything will work out great increases a lot. So just take out your calendar and find the first 2 meetings.
So at this point, hopefully you've gotten a great head start on your mentoring relationship going forward. And now, before we finish off this virtual kickoff, we'd just like to mention a couple of finishing points before we leave you. First one is that a lot of you mentees have signed up to this program because you're ambitious and because you're willing to learn more. In case you want to gain some more experience during your study time, we're actually looking actively for team members or people to be part of expanding Conflux in the future. So if you think this whole project and program sounds really interesting and you'd like to help out, then feel free to reach out to either Christian and I on the information mentioned on the screen. And we'll get back to you as soon as possible with what options there are. It's also important to emphasize that Conflux is not just about the pairs that you're in, but the whole network of participants in general. And that's why, for you to be able to participate in this network, we created a couple of groups for mentors and mentees so that you can communicate during the program, ask questions, or get advice from other pairs and what they're doing in their relationship. You can find the link to these groups in the email we've sent out prior to this kickoff. Besides our 2 network groups, we will also be sending out the Conflux newsletters, which will include some information about both what's happening in the program, but also some stories of some of the matches and pairs we have participating in this round. And finally, we want to thank you for watching our virtual kickoff. Thank you for engaging and getting the best out of this relationship. And we hope and wish you the best of luck for your relationship going forward.
On behalf of us and the rest of Team Conflux,
We wish you a very nice day.
bye! I think waving is cute.